Hey, welcome to the Halloween edition of the Dr. Jimbo Love Show. I'm here with Seth Matthew, and we did pretty well last week, didn't we?
Yeah, not too shabby.
So we want to invite you guys all to come down to Brothers tonight as big things are happening here. Costume contest.
Yep.
Lots of big money. What, $100 first prize?
Yep, $100 gift card both. We're going to do that tonight and tomorrow.
Costumes are not mandatory, but definitely encouraged.
Mm-hmm.
So last week we talked a little bit about Coach Orgeron, Coach O at LSU, and he is definitely still out.
Yep.
But it looks like he was playing around a little bit too much and dipping his pen in the company ink a little bit one too many times. Again, the SEC has no tolerance for teams like LSU, Alabama, Georgia, Florida to go 500. Mm-hmm. They're there to win.
Yeah.
Last week we had OU versus Kansas. Big surprise, Seth.
40-point favorite OU.
Yep.
And at halftime down by 10.
Yes.
Now, luckily, Caleb Williams willed Oklahoma back to a victory there. I was thankful, but it was not good enough to keep them up in the standings. Even with the win, undefeated, they were leapfrogged by one-loss Alabama. So they are now in the 4 seed.
Yeah, and a matter of fact, the freshman quarterback for OU actually on a fourth down play grabbed the ball from a struggling running back and ended up getting the first down that I think secured the game for you guys.
Yeah, I got him a 14-point win. The big thing was there is I had to even look it up, like, was that play legal? I've never seen that before.
Never in my life. But, and for an 18-year-old with the presence of mind to do that, outstanding.
Yeah, how to be that smart. Seniors don't even do that in college football.
No.
Even most pro quarterbacks pull that.
No, I've never seen it done before. So good, props to him. OSU versus Iowa State. It was a game we watched very closely here at Brothers. And unfortunately, I really hated to see the way that it kind of ended. A pretty generous spot for the Iowa State contingency. Mm-hmm. It looked like it could have been a yard and a half difference. And it really caused the game to swing towards Iowa State. Now, there is no challenge in college for a spot, which I didn't realize. Unfortunately, that might be something that the Rules Commission would consider.
Well, and the big thing here is, I've watched Iowa State play a little bit. I've watched Oklahoma State play a little bit. Nothing's really impressed me on either one, so it was going to be a really interesting game because Oklahoma State's been undefeated. Iowa State's taken their beatings. They've lost 2 games this year. And they came out with a victory over an undefeated Oklahoma State. But, the same issues we see with Oklahoma State, we see in Oklahoma right now. Oklahoma is undefeated, but every game, like this Kansas game, that they should blow out. They're not blowing out.
Right. So. Well, what happens is it really it hurts OU. We talked about OU being leapfrogged by Alabama. Well, OU needed OSU for the Bedlam game to be, for them to have the fewest number of losses. So we just want to keep that in mind as well. We're watching OU very closely because it's very rare that you watch a team that has a 1 loss, right?
Well, now you change
you guys are undefeated.
Yeah, and you change the whole dynamic of the Big 12. So here's what's going to happen is now, let's say both teams win out. Oklahoma beats them, maybe they lose to Iowa State, beat Oklahoma State. That changes the championship of the Big 12. At this point, it was supposed to be Oklahoma versus Oklahoma State. Didn't matter who won. Well, it does for rankings, but
sure.
They would have played each other the next day. Well, now Iowa State's only 1 game sitting back of Oklahoma State, and any falter by Oklahoma State for the rest of the year, that changes the whole dynamic of this matchup for the Big 12 championship.
Absolutely. That's a great point, Seth. Oregon versus UCLA. I was wrong. I really thought that UCLA being at home
quack
would, and Chip Kelly, of course, because he was a former coach of Oregon, the chip on his shoulder would transmit into a victory, and unfortunately it was not.
And now he's 0-3 against his old
Is
team.
it? Wow, poor Chip. It looked like Seth got it done last week. He picked Oregon. I picked UCLA, so that was a loss for me. What did you pick with the Iowa State game last week?
We went opposite. I took Oklahoma State, who fell up short. I was more hopeful
And I had Iowa State?
Yeah,
Okay.
you took Iowa State.
Okay. And then for the OU Kansas game, we both had OU, of course.
Nobody's going to pick Kansas.
No. So, what were your impressions? Did you get a chance to watch a little bit of that Oregon-UCLA game?
So it was a tight match. I mean, Oregon has played good all year, minus their one blimp on the radar where they took a loss. But other than that, they've been solid all year. UCLA is a team that has done well this year, but they're getting better as the season goes on. So it was just a matter of, has UCLA overcame that, and it was a close game.
Yeah.
So it was a great matchup because I believe UCLA started the game up 14-0, and Oregon came back and tied it up.
Yeah, and I think it ended up being, a 3-point difference?
Yeah, so it was a great game.
17-14. Air Force versus San Diego State. I was completely wrong here. Again, Seth had said that this was going to be a game that's the traditional defense versus the offense, and it looks like defense won out.
Yeah.
San Diego State won, and Seth, what have you got on that? Have you had a chance to watch any of that in the evening?
So it comes down to I think I said it last week as well, is these armed forces football teams, they're tricky.
Yes.
Navy, Army, it doesn't matter who they play. They could get blown out by a Bowling Green, like Minnesota did, and they could come back next day and play a top 25 team and pull the upset. They just play a different type of football that translates. It's inconsistent, but it translates well to college.
Yeah, it's a real old belly offense, that we used to run back in the 80s. So, South Carolina versus Texas A&M, it was just an absolute clubbing, beating. There was 44-0 after the third quarter. South Carolina got a couple garbage touchdowns at the end. Again, South Carolina's offensive woes continue. They're the 109th most productive Division I-A offense, which puts them pretty much at the basement. I don't know if there's any more teams. That might be the lowest. I mean, what is there, 110 Division I AA teams?
I'm not sure how many there are, but I mean, with South Carolina, I don't know what they need right now. It's not technically, I mean, you can always consider it a rebuild in college football, but they really need to find a winning way. And I don't know if that's new coaching.
Well, they have a new coach. This is their new coach, and this is their first year underneath him. Being 4-3, I think, is actually really generous. They played some teams like Troy State and Appalachian State, some teams that aren't really what you'd consider anything close to a Power 5 conference, and that's where they've got most of their 4 wins.
Yeah, and so, I mean, it's going to be interesting. They need to find a way to catch up there in one of the toughest divisions in college football.
Oh, big time.
And the unfortunate thing is the teams in their division, the teams in the SEC, they reload constantly, and South Carolina's been falling off, so they need to really work on that recruiting. They just need that one get a top 10 QB that's coming out of high school and have him get some other players to follow.
They really, or maybe something through a graduate portal, through a transfer portal, because
Spencer Rattler.
You never know. I mean, that would be really wonderful.
Maybe he's going to leave.
You've got Skip Holtz, not Skip Holtz, but we have Frank Beamer's son as the coach there. He's been known as a great recruiter, so we'll just have to wait and see what he builds over the next couple years. Clemson versus Pitt. Again, I had picked Pitt to win, and boy, it looked like Pitt just pulled out a 27-17 victory. What are your impressions of Clemson's offense and the woes that they continue to have?
So, I mean, you lost some really good wide receivers. You lost a good running back. You lost Trevor Lawrence. I mean, it's a rebuild here. The guy that replaced him played a couple games, but some of them were coming in during blowouts. Some were when he was forced in, but he had all those top options. So he had a lot of support. Well, a lot of those guys graduated. It's a rebuild. Unfortunately for them, they ran into a Pittsburgh team where I believe his name is Kyle Pitts, is going to be a top Heisman candidate. Between him and the Ole Miss guy right now, because I believe Caleb Williams kind of gave that up yesterday, even though he was a long shot already. Made a great play. I think it's going to be between Kyle Pitts and the Ole Miss quarterback. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out.
Good. And then our last game that we featured was USC versus Notre Dame. Notre Dame really handled their business. Ended up being a 31-16 victory for Notre Dame. What are your impressions on Notre Dame? Do they have the ability to win out?
They have the ability to win out, but they are obviously always hurt being in college football because they decide to never quite go into like the toughest games. I mean, they've had a hard schedule this year. I'll give them that. But Purdue did hold in with them. Yep. That beat Iowa. Yep. I feel like if they do make it, you're going to run into an Alabama team. They're going to get embarrassed like they did the one year, and they lost by like 40. Yeah. That's when they had Mete Tayo had an imaginary girlfriend.
That's right. It was being catfished just time.
It was
and terrible. Then he was heartbroken over it, which was just even more pathetic, I think.
Yeah, it was really embarrassing.
All right, so again, it's Halloween weekend. We want to encourage you to come down to Brothers this afternoon. Again, Seth can get you any TV you would want for your games. College football is such a wonderful institution. You can catch any number of games, 6 to 9, 11 games on your regular stations at home. But come on down here, get it, listen to it in stereo and have some good comfort food. And then later this evening, tell us a little bit about what's going on.
Yeah, so about 9 o'clock, we'll probably do the costume contest around 10 o'clock. You know, we don't want any of the kiddos here during that, just because it does get kind of more of like a party atmosphere. But to go back earlier in the day, a new thing we started, I believe, 2 weeks ago, maybe even last week. We do show the ESPN Plus UFCs. Those are usually on Fight Island, and so they play at like noon. So here with college football, if you want to see the UFC, we now have the option to do that. Of course, we show every pay-per-view, which is Saturday nights, but the ESPN Pluses start at noon, usually on Saturdays.
Very good, very good. Yeah, and Brothers is located at the shops at Northfield. Now, if you don't know where that is just directly across I-70 from former Stapleton, now considered Central Park area. So come over, you'll be able to find Outdoor World. Everybody knows where Outdoor World is. We are just down the street from us, and you'll see our nice sized patio here with ski lifts right behind us, which is pretty neat, and it's called Brothers Bar and Grill. Let's talk a little bit about Alabama. Alabama goes out and wins 52-24 versus Tennessee. They have one loss, folks. Remember, they lost to
Texas A&M. Seth Smalls.
Yep. And they leapfrog an undefeated Oklahoma team. Tell us a little bit more about how much frustration that is for an Oklahoma University fan like yourself.
Yeah, you're going to run into this issue. I mean, Alabama's beating people convincingly, so obviously they do deserve what they're going to be. It's just, it's always been a very concerning thing that keeps smaller schools, not like OU, but the UCFs of the world, the Boise States, that pull off these undefeated seasons, and we still allow number one teams to stay in the top four. Cincinnati, they haven't done them wrong yet. I'll give them that. They put Cincinnati at 2.
Don't worry, it's coming, Cincinnati.
Yeah. Even when we talked about college game day today, they were talking if Georgia were to lose today, who goes number one?
Right.
And there was a talk, well, do you put Alabama or do you put a one-loss Ohio State team up there? But nobody talked about the 2 undefeateds, really, about going to number one.
And Georgia's playing a Mizzou team, right, today?
No, Georgia is...
Are they not playing Mizzou?
Florida.
No. Are they? Oh, they are.
Yeah, Georgia's Florida.
My goodness gracious, that's what we're going to talk about a little bit down here. It's the world's largest cocktail party. It used to be called that. We're not allowed to call that anymore. The PC police have disallowed the largest cocktail party in the world moniker to be used any further. Big game, Michigan. Okay?
Yep. Michigan.
Seth is a Michigan boy.
I am a Minnesota boy.
And a Minnesota boy. I'm messing around with you.
But yeah, no, I mean, this matchup is awesome. Regardless of whether they're ranked. Now, this year is the highest they've ever both been ranked since like 1941.
Both undefeated?
Yeah, both undefeated. They've never really ran into this. Is it in Michigan State?
It is. I believe it's in Lansing.
And so they're favoring Michigan by 4.
Believe it or not.
But Michigan has one of the top rushing offenses in the country. They average 253.3 yards a game, which is just out of this world. It's number 1 in the Big Ten, number 5 in all of college football. But you got Michigan State, too, that has a top running back over there. He was actually, we talked about it earlier a couple weeks ago about the transfer portal. He was the transfer from Wake Forest. He's the number 1 running back in the country with 977 yards. And I believe he has like 14 touchdowns on the year, which is just astronomical.
But how do you think Michigan State's going to stop the Michigan run game? Because that's really what Michigan's bread and butter is. It's not going to be a dynamic offense, Harbaugh. has out there, but he definitely can grind it out.
Now, pardon me if I say his name wrong, but Ben Vanserium is a Michigan player from last year that now plays for Michigan State, and he's their linebacker. Now, it's interesting to see a transfer that goes in-state rival college. He's going to try to play a game. Now, the Michigan players are fired up too, saying they don't want him to win and they want to make him sorry for leaving.
Right.
But I think the big edge in this game is going to come down to quarterback play. Michigan's quarterback is not very efficient. He relies heavily on the one. Michigan State's quarterback, on the other hand, is very efficient, and he has played a heck of a season so far, and I think that's where the edge is. Even though Michigan's favored, I have gone back and forth all morning. I think I told Jim right before the show I'm picking Michigan. I'm going Michigan State. Yep.
Oh, is he going Michigan State?
I'm switching. I have to switch.
And I was just teasing about Seth being from Michigan.
But to go with that, Michigan State is in the top 25 in the country. He's the quarterback of Michigan State. Top 25 in QB efficiency. And that's going to play a huge role with ball security and just holding the Michigan Wolverines back.
Yeah, it's going to be a great game. It's going right now. As a matter of fact, let's do a little score. Let's see if we can pull it up for you here. We'll get you a score. What we got here? Of course, I'm struggling over here to find this thing because I'm on my Penn State game. But we don't have a score yet. We'll get back to you on that. Right now, it's nothing. Next game we're looking at is Oklahoma University. Seth's bread and butter team here. 8-0 versus Texas Tech. Texas Tech has a quarterback they call the Hollywood Gunslinger that transferred there from Utah State. Going to be interesting because OU has a little bit of trouble with the pass defense. You were 113 in pass defense.
Yep.
So I'm going to let Seth take it from here. How is OU going to win today?
So here's the thing. OU only knows how to win. They lose maybe one game a year, and I don't think it's here. This is what I believe they call this is this the Red River rivalry for Texas Tech?
No, that's the OU Texas because of Red River rivalry.
Okay.
This is maybe something else, some kind of boot game or whatever.
But you have OU coming off a slump, but still came out with a W. The tensions are going to be high, but OU, I think Caleb Williams puts on a show today. It's going to be high scoring. Don't get me wrong. OU cannot play defense. Right. We're looking at a 42-35 game today. But it is going to be a great shootout today. And I think Caleb Williams makes a statement because last week I was saying, wow, we've never had a guy that we've been talking about, a Heisman, that missed like the first 5-6 weeks of football. Yeah. And now we're talking about him. And after his KU performance, that pressure's off. Yeah. So now he can just go out there, play, and win games. He doesn't have to worry about the Heisman, doesn't have to worry about his stats. Okay. So I think he comes out there, they put on a show, and they beat Texas Tech.
Definitely right about that. You had the 18-year-old face some adversity, down by 10 at halftime, lots of pressure, came back and played wonderfully in the second half. We got number 9, Iowa versus Wisconsin. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the University of Minnesota versus Northwestern.
Yep.
It looks like Iowa, we got to remember, Iowa is 6-1. Of course, they lost a real tough game to Purdue. But they're on a bye week, so they'll bounce back. And Wisconsin goes out and plays against the team that Iowa loses to and crushes them, 30-13. Yeah. So what do you got for this game here, Seth?
So, I mean, you're looking at Wisconsin here, and you're like, oh, how are they ever going to hold up with Iowa? And I'm going to tell you why, because I'm picking Wisconsin all the way here. Wisconsin's going back home. They're going to Camp, is it Camp Ripley or Fort Ripley?
No, Camp, it's in Madison.
But either way.
Camp something.
But Camp Randall. Sorry about that, folks. So they're going to Camp Randall. And the big thing with that is you look at Wisconsin's loss. It was a healthy Penn State team they lost to. They lost to Notre Dame when Notre Dame was rolling. All of their losses have come against great teams. But the difference is Wisconsin, those all happened weeks ago. Wisconsin now strung a couple victories together. They're figuring it out. Iowa, I don't know where your head's at mentally. You just had a college football championship in your view, and that's gone. That won't happen.
It's going to see whether or not they have the letdown from coming back off. University of Minnesota versus Northwestern. Northwestern really hasn't done much this year. What are your Golden Gophers going to do?
Well, a lot of folks might be wondering, like, why are you talking about Minnesota and Northwestern? I'm going to tell you why right here. If Minnesota wins this game and Iowa loses, it is now going to be they're going to be tied for the top side of the other side of the Big Ten, which has big implications. Now, for Minnesota, does it mean a championship run? No. But what it does mean is there a Rose Bowl implication? Because what happens is, if the Big Ten champion wins the conference and they're in the top 4, they go to that championship and we send the other team to the Rose Bowl. So on a team where you lost your top running back, you lost your second running back, and now you're on a third running back, you had a top wide receiver leave you last year, they have Rose Bowl aspirations all of a sudden. Oh, yeah. And we would have never thought that looking at this season. So it is just going to be an amazing game. I think Minnesota wins that. I hope Iowa loses.
Yeah.
And we're just going to see the Big Ten is getting all shaken up today.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then speaking of Big Ten, my goodness gracious, we've got Penn State versus Ohio State. Penn State's quarterback who got hurt against Iowa, which really cost Penn State the game, I believe, because, once he went out, it was bad. But he is back, and he says he's 100%. C.J. Stroud for Ohio State was the freshman of the year, or freshman
Only
of the
getting
week.
better.
This guy is just instant offense. And right now, Ohio State is considered probably one of the top 3 offenses in college football. What do you got for this game?
So this game has weird implications. If Ohio State wins this because Penn State's ranked and they got a full team, Ohio State might hop in that top 4. If OU doesn't blow out Texas Tech, it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. We could have an undefeated OU out of the top 5. Now, Ohio State, though, if they lose, Penn State lost 2 games. They lost to Illinois last week, which is
in a 9
terrible.
overtime game, which was the craziest game. I don't think if anybody has ever seen this.
Yeah, it's the longest game in college football.
Unbelievable. They both teams squandered so many opportunities to win it in either regulation or overtime. It was the craziest game I've ever seen. They switched it over in overtime number 5, so we were kind of catching up. But to see a game go 9 overtimes, my goodness gracious. By the way, in that last 4 sections, you basically line up on the 3-yard line and you're going for a 2-point conversion. If you get it, it goes on. If you both get it, it goes to the next overtime. If you don't get it, game over. And that's what happened.
Well, and the crazy one thing about this game, too, is Penn State wins this game. Ohio State, you're not going to the top 4. Penn State's never lost with their starting quarterback. So that's going to be very interesting to play out. Does it factor in voting? Does it factor in how they value it? Or is it just wins and losses? And I think we're going to get a true thing, because if Penn State goes and wins the Big Ten with Michigan and Michigan State losing, all the other top teams, Bama might go to 2 losses if they play Georgia, or they could split. Georgia will have 1, Cincinnati's the only undefeated, Oklahoma could stay undefeated. And then you're not going to have a Big Ten champion in the top 4, which is very rare to see.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. I'm telling you, that's the best thing about college football. You never know what's going to happen, and so many different games play out down the stretch that change the total scope of the season on a dime. Mississippi versus Auburn, okay? This, again, is Lane Kiffin's at home in Mississippi. I don't know. This is kind of my upset special. I think Auburn comes in there. Auburn's been on a little bit of a roll lately and beats Mississippi. As a matter of fact, Auburn is a 2.5-point favorite, which maybe Vegas knows something we don't.
So the big thing here is Auburn, Bo Nix, game all comes down to you. You have to be consistent. The 2 games you lost, you play great teams and you kind of faltered. Ole Miss only has 1 loss. But they've won some spectacular games. They had that big win against Arkansas. That Arkansas went for 2 and they pulled off that win.
Yep. They
just crushed an LSU team that's been kind of struggling. And Auburn, it all goes through Bo Nix. Now, Ole Miss, they're already talking about, do they have a Heisman candidate on their team? Bo Nix came in this season and everybody was so high on him. And obviously with the 2 losses, they're not where they want to be. Auburn holds the series matchup 34-10.
Wow.
I didn't read why, but Ole Miss does have one that was vacated for some reason.
Interesting.
So I'm going to give the edge. I'm going to go Ole Miss. I don't think Bo Nix shows up to the occasion because he needs to right now. If you guys remember 2 weeks ago, I went against Bo Nix and he made me pay. So we're going to see. Here it goes. Maybe I'm making Bo Nix play better by saying he's not going to win.
Yeah, and I'm a Bo Nix fan today. Iowa State versus West Virginia. And we have basically Iowa State that's come off 3 victories in a row. They are in at 5-2, whereas West Virginia really hasn't been that relevant, as you said earlier.
Some
3
close
and 4.
games.
Yeah.
But the big thing here is Iowa State's O-line. If Iowa State's O-line runs over the defense of West Virginia, this game's not even going to be close. Right now, the Brock Purdy for Iowa State, he's had probably the most time in all of college football to make decisions and pick apart defenses because his O-line just holds up.
Right.
And when you have that as a quarterback, it is invaluable. He is... I predict this game. I believe Iowa State's a 7-point favorite. I see this being a 10 or more victory for them. And, West Virginia, I wish you the best of luck. I just don't see it happening today.
Yep. Well, good deal. Well, that gives us a pretty good idea. Again, we got some games that are already under progress. Michigan State. Come on down to Brothers. We're right here at the shops at Northfield, Brothers Bar and Grill. And check us out. Seth and I will be here all day. We're going to take a quick break and we're going to talk a little bit about NFL. In the meantime, happy Halloween and come on out tonight if you feel like getting on your costumes. And Seth's got a big party here at Brothers. We'll tell you more about it in our next segment. We'll be right back.
See you guys.
Yep.